Hello and welcome to our show, The Awakening, on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo and Going Bold Network. The information and opinions expressed on this show are just that, the opinions of the individual speaking based on their individual personal experiences. They are not intended to diagnose and do not constitute professional advice or recommendations. Hello, my name is Tina Huggins. And this is my husband, Joe Huggins.
Hello.
And today we've got our guest that has a story about domestic violence. But instead of putting her head in the sand and hiding, she's become, and my words are, over survivor. And her name is Nicole Middendorf. And a little bit about her is Nicole is a money maven, a knowledge junkie, a survivor, a single mom, a born coach. She is an entrepreneur who left Morgan Stanley in 2003 to run her own wealth management firm. Nicole is also the author of 5 books. She is a world traveler and a philanthropist. I always love that word. And an accomplished public speaker. So I'm super excited to have Nicole with us. Thank you and welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
So I know that you had told me your story here a couple of months ago about what you went through. So can you kind of tell our viewers what you experienced in your relationship?
Yeah. So I'm an only child and a former figure skater, and my parents are still happily married. And the big question has always been for me in this whole journey is, how did I end up being manipulated? And how did I end up in the situation that I'm in? And pieces now make sense I've been doing lots of complex PTSD therapy recently. But I went up to college, and it was the first time really ever that I had met a guy that I thought was super interested and excited about my huge, big goals and dreams. And I had the amazing opportunity to study abroad over in Germany in high school. And then I did again in college. And that's where I fell in love with the United Nations. And I had this dream to go to law school and be like Madeleine Albright and Ruth Bader Ginsburg and change the world. But everything with him was super fast. Dating, engaged, had a house, married. My car was gone and I had a car that was in his name. It was just all super, super fast. Now that I look back at it, in wiser eyes, you can say, versus just in my 20s. And so my dreams were kicked aside of going to law school. He had dreamt of being a stockbroker his whole life. And so once I graduated, I'm like, I'm, going to start applying and getting ready to go to law school. He's like, no, you're not. He's like, you're going to work with me. I didn't understand work with me meant work for me and do all of my work for me. And so that's how I got started as a financial advisor. I believe though everything happens for a reason and you meet people for a reason. Being a wealth advisor would have never been a career that I picked. But now fast forward, it makes sense to me. Money is overwhelming and intimidating to many people. And those are the feelings as a victim of domestic violence that I never, ever, ever will forget. And so, and one being a woman in a male dominated industry, there's so many things, but fast forward in 2003, so over 21 years ago, I left Morgan Stanley and started my own business. And I was working at the time with my husband. He was the branch manager of our office. And we called the company Strategic Financial. And he grew it that he had 12 financial advisors that he was the manager of. And I was one of those advisors. And I started to go on TV a little bit. I did a radio show. I ended up doing a radio show for 5 years. I then wrote a book. And so in the community, we'd be out and about and everyone's like, oh my gosh, Nicole Middendorf. And he would be just very supportive. And, yes, she was just on TV today. I will always remember being at the Costco store and we get in the car and the door shuts, and literally I'm like, wow, how is this Jekyll and Hyde? Like, how am I living in this kind of environment? I tried to get out a number of times, and then fast forward, we had children. My son and my daughter, they're 17 months apart. So again, like everything was super, super fast. And I was trying to get out, but I didn't. I couldn't. I felt like I couldn't. And so August 4th of 2010 was the first time the 911 phone call went through, because as a mom, you go into mama bear mode when your kids are being hurt. Looking back now, it's like the stuff that I allowed happen to me, like I rationalize that, but once it happens to your children, you're like, this is not okay. And so, so a warrant was put up for his arrest, and I started, just 10 years in court with him. I had to give him the company name, the website, the phone number, the 12 financial advisors. And in 2012, I virtually started all over again with a company called Prosperwell Financial. But nothing in my life I'd picked out. I had not picked out my house. I hated my house. We had this huge house. I hated it. I hadn't picked out my car. We had boats, four-wheelers, jet skis, none of it. Even my career, like nothing in my life had my like being, or like who I was as a person. I felt like I had totally lost myself. And so I got the kids to bed one night, and I'm like, how did I end up here? And what do I do about this? So I always had lists growing up as a figure skater. I was blessed to have a coach that had her PhD in psychology. She always worked with me with the power of the mind. So I rewrote my bucket list. Well, if you tell people you're doing something on your bucket list, they think you're dying. And so I just wrote down 12 things, and I'm like, the average divorce in Minnesota takes a year. Little did I know I'd be in court for over 10. But I'm like, I'm just going to do one thing a month for a year. This will help distract me. And little did I know how it would change my life, because when you tell people you're doing something on your bucket list, they think you're dying. So I just started calling it the Live It list, because everything in my life was so negative. I needed to not have one more negative thing. Well, then I learned 1 in 3 Americans is happy. I then learned if you spend more money on experiences, you're going to be happier than if you spend money on things. So I kind of had this aha moment of, oh my gosh, like, here's how I can love financial planning. So now fast forward, I own my own 9,000 square foot commercial building. I have 9 employees. I was just on TV. I'm still generally on TV, radio once a week. I've written 5 books. We launched the liveitlist.com. I take people on Live It List trips. So I took 5 other women to Costa Rica earlier this year. We're headed to Dubai in November, and we do local Live It List events. We have a Live It List Facebook group, and it's all about living life to the fullest and being happy, because I wake up every morning. I don't have someone punching me. I don't have someone waking me up by throwing a glass of water on me. And I'm just generally happy. And so many times as a financial advisor, I see people that are unhappy, or they're working in a job because they feel like they need to for money, or when they get this, or when they get this debt paid off, or when they get this certain amount, then they'll be happy. And really, that's my story, is helping people realize, like, you don't have to have these monetary things, or you don't have to have this stuff. Like, that's not what's going to bring you happiness. Being fulfilled inside, knowing your why, knowing why you're here, and really surrounding yourself with good quality people is what brings you joy and happiness. So that's the short version.
Well, and I mean, you covered lots of years with that short version, so that's good. Joe and I kind of talked just briefly. I showed him your picture and kind of went over some of your bio and stuff with him, and he made this comment. He says, "Oh, she was arm candy. That's what made her so, got to keep her right here. She's the reason, or the person that's going to bring all this money and fame to me. So I've got to keep her on a leash." And something you said in there kind of jogged me back to one of my situations with my ex. And we as women, we always wonder, how did we get here? And we don't wonder it every day of our lives. There's a lot of chunks that go through, and then we go, how did we get here? And we go through more chunks, and how did we get here? And you talked about getting punched. I ended up with a broken hand. And in that same fight, I ended up with separated ribs. And he gaslit me into believing that the broken hand was my fault, which, I mean, technically it was me who broke the hand in releasing his grip from me. But then he tossed me on the bed and he said that he was only trying to protect me because I was one of these, I don't want to fight, I don't want to scream anymore, let me leave for a minute, get myself together so we can talk about this later. And he stuck his knee in my chest and he said that whole event was all my fault. And I went for years after that fight. And I can just remember, just as you were talking about that, it just like, it's like a trigger. It takes me back into that. I'm a 5th degree black belt. How the hell did this happen to me? I can fight, I can defend. That's how the hand got broke, is because I knew how to release that grip. There was a door jam in the way, and then we're here. And we never had the cops called on us, or I never called the cops on him. And partly because, I mean, I can take care of myself physically. It was that yelling and stuff. Now, Joe, he actually had the cops. His ex called the cops on him a couple of times.
3 times, and it could have been 4, but I'm going to say definitely 3. And each time there was different police that showed up, and they were always 2 at a time. And it's just, and they never arrested me. They believed my truth, and I just told it how it was, and I said, this is what happened, and they never arrested me, but they said, one of them said, Joe, I can't kick you out of your house, but I'm going to recommend that you leave because it's not safe. And it's so true. And I had 6 kids. So, and they all grew up super awesome, which is incredible in a household like what we had. But that's the success. And I would never recommend that somebody marry somebody that's that toxic to get strong kids, to get wise kids. But the kids are savvy. They're, but again, don't drag them through it. I'd do it completely different again, using my wisdom now. It'd be a completely different story. She did attack me one time, punched me, bloody nose, pulled my hair, scratching me. She bit my back, just reached over and just right through my shirt. And I did make the report. And when I made the report, I just said, I just want to make the report. That's how naive I was. And then they go, oh no, it's out of your hands. We're going to go arrest her. So then they go arrest her in front of my kids, and that's a big scene. And then I was back in the house because previously I was out of the house. She wanted to work on stuff. So I rode my bicycle over from my friend's house. We were 3/10 of a mile away from my friends to the marital house. And I just rode the bicycle over there. And that's when the attack happened. And a little bit of ground story there. But it was a big ordeal, and I learned a lot the hard way. And like you, I'm still dealing with a lot of things 10 years later. She still owes me money. She'll skip payments and more payments, and it's just
she's in contempt actually.
She's in contempt, and it's really hard to get people to do what they're supposed to do, and it just seems like they get away with murder, and I feel like I got to walk this straight line, but I like walking a straight line anyways. So anyways, yeah, a lot of tragic things that's happened, and police called, and thank God I was never arrested, because I could have been, they could have believed her, and she had marks on her, and I'm like, yeah, I wonder how she got those, But anyways, that's just part of what I went through.
Yeah, and when we go through that, like you in your story there, Nicole, there's so much, and I'm sure that you've read Tina Swithin's books, and your story is so much like Tina's in many parts of what that time frame, the kids, and how long you were in court. And because you had littles, that makes the dealings in court so much more difficult and so much more of it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So kind of tell us a little bit about all of that type of abuse through that.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, I really feel like our court system continues to abuse the victim. And that's where, if anything, like I was embarrassed and I was really hesitant to tell the story. And now, and really what happened was I was asked to be on a panel at a women's conference. And I was up on stage and I didn't really say like, I'm a survivor of domestic violence, but I kind of made light of, I married Prince Charming. It didn't really work out the way that I planned. And I said a few things to that extent. And I got off the stage and the line of women was like out the door. And to the point that the woman running the conference was like, we need you to go in the hallway because you're distracting it for the next speaker. And it was at that moment where like these women were just like crying and like, thank you so much for sharing your story. Like, wow, this is inspiring. Like you got out, now I know I can, or like, how did you do this? And it was at that moment where I'm like, I need to talk. Like I need to be very vocal. And that's where now, fast forward, my kids are teenagers. And it's like the stuff that my kids know. I mean, child protection again came last year for another interview. And I think that was the 16th time that my kids have been interviewed from child protection. Now that they're teenagers, they're aware of what's going on. But I remember them getting off the bus and they were like 6 or 7, 7 or 8, something like that. And they're like, child protection came to school to talk to us today. Like, I didn't even know what child protection was until I was in my 30s and having to deal with it when my ex was arrested. Like, it just floors me how broken our system is. And my ex was actually, so my ex has had, he's currently married, but they're going through a divorce. She's had 5 restraining orders on him. And my ex was convicted last Thursday for an incident that happened last summer again. They brought it from 3 felony charges down to a misdemeanor, but that's where like I have this fear of like, what's next? Like, what does someone have to do to other people or themselves for us to really like do something? And I feel like, and so I'm kind of conflicted from standpoint. There are people out there that claim abuse, that it really wasn't abuse. And I feel like they make it more difficult for the people that actually were in bad situations. And then on the other end, we also have like full jails. we don't have the resources behind. And I feel like now there's also becoming much more an awareness of domestic violence. Like there's an organization called Maria's Voice, which was founded here in Minnesota, but it's national. There was a woman that was murdered and her family like had no clue. And so the concept behind Maria's Voice is to like, we kind of know what to look for with a heart attack. We kind of know what to look for with a stroke, but we don't know what to look for in signs of someone that is potentially a victim of domestic violence. And so that's their whole focus is like, and they're going into corporations to like you as an employer, you as an employee, like when you're seeing someone showing up at work with, a black and blue eye, or, they're missing appointments, or things are late, or things are canceled, or they're just, canceling on their friends, like all those, being isolated, all of those different things that happen to really bring about awareness. And I feel like, too many people are affected by it and there hasn't been people talking about it. And now I feel like people are talking about it, but it's a crisis. Like I look at, the amount of therapy and things that my kids have gone through and continue to go through, let alone myself, because that's where for me now, I felt like I dealt with everything emotionally, but I never understood how the book is called Your Body Keeps Score. I never understood how physically things affect you forever. And it's been fascinating. And it's been this huge learning journey for me to learn more about the medical component of it and the stuff that happened to me, you know, for so many years, so long ago, physically is ingrained in me. And, you know, how do you deal with that? How do you process it? And really, like, I look at it, how can I take something that is a bad thing and how can I make it a good thing? Like, it is what it is. Like, it is my life. It's my history. It's part of my story. But how can I empower more people with their money, with their happiness, with their kids, you know, because frankly, people that hear my story, they're like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, you know what? It's made me a better mom. This has made me a better friend. It's made me a better employer. It's made me a better wealth advisor. It's made me a better public speaker, author, like all of the, you know, philanthropist, like all the things that I'm involved in. It's made me who I am.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I love that you say that. I know that I don't talk or try not to talk real ill of my ex-husband because he was the right man for that situation. He's the father of my kids, and I have 2 wonderful kids. And that situation, what I went through then, it made me who I am. And if we back up in my story prior to all of that into my childhood, there was some molestation that took place, not just by children my own age. And there was lots of boys that were involved in that because I was naive at 9 years old. Who at 9 years old knows about this stuff, right? And so those type of events put me in a situation that later in my late teens and early 20s got me into some bad places in a bad situation, right? Because that naiveness just kind of gave its own story to itself. But that, you know, I mentioned I'm a 5th degree black belt. Those events are the reason why I kept with my martial arts training, the reason why I worked towards that 5th degree, and the reason why I hung out with that group of people, because it was an empowering group of people, just like hanging out with women who have gone through this. And one of the reasons why I started doing this podcast, Joe and I started doing this podcast, is because men also need to know that other men have been in abused situations. My own father has been shot at more than once. He was driven over with a dually pickup truck, and I ended up picking him up out of the hospital from that one. And he's still in an abusive situation, more verbal than anything now. But men also have to know that you need to speak up, because if you don't speak up, then we can't help other people. And like, that's why Joe's here, is because he's trying to help other men see that speaking up, admitting that you're in an abusive situation. My dad still can't use the word abuse in a situation with his name. He can't. And so all of that made you who you are, if it hadn't gone on, you wouldn't be who you are. So it's a gift and ugly, ugly wrapping paper.
Mhm.
And so with all of the things that you've gone through, Nicole, you know, I loved, you know, I was reading through part of your bio and I had to look this word up. I had to look up what Maven was. So can you tell the audience what Maven means, what a money Maven is?
So I was going on Fox TV and someone called me a finance fox. And at first I thought it was funny. And then I was like, you know what? I don't want my kids in high school, like walking down the hallway and people are like, your mom is the finance fox. And so I went to that gentleman. I was like, I really like, this is cute, but let's like not do that. And so over the years, people have said money maven. And I'm like, okay, like that's okay. Like I'll let you call me a money maven, but we're not gonna do the finance fox. So the biggest thing is, you know, I have my own foundation. And so I'm all about financial literacy. I'm all about supporting people with domestic violence. Because when the police were called and they came to my house, they handed me a card and it was for a domestic abuse shelter. And for years I had volunteered there. I'm a certified divorce financial analyst. So my husband at the time took my car that was paid for and went and bought a Lexus and put the license plate on it that says was his. We were married. And he's like, you're going to be the first certified divorce financial analyst in Minnesota. And so I was, even though like I was raised private Catholic, I was raised divorced. Like you don't get divorced. I mean, it's part of the reason why I stayed married for so long was my fundamental beliefs and how I was raised. And so when they came with this card, I was like, yes, I've been there almost weekly, like talking and explaining how divorce and money works and empowering these women that would be at the domestic abuse shelter. And it made sense. Like afterwards, things always make sense. Like, during some of these classes that I would sit in on, they would have the emotional abuse wheel. And now I'm like, wow, like now I get it. Like why I was volunteering there and why I was so like that, why I was so drawn to that is because like, okay, like I could see myself in it. But when the police handed me this card and I picked up the phone and I called them, I was thrown into this world like that I had no clue about. Like even learning, recently about criminal courts, like I had no experience in that stuff with child protection or OFPs or, restraining orders or any of that. And so I committed to myself that when I got through on the other side, that I didn't want it that police just handed a card and they're like, good luck. I wanted it that someone has a support system for a whole year. And so that's what my foundation does, is it really surrounds these women. We take nominations every October and we surround these women for a year. And we ask them, what do you need? And so some people need tax help. So we'll get them a CPA. I'll give free financial advice. Maybe it's a therapist for the kids or a life coach or a business coach. And at the end of the year, we take them to the Mall of America with $1,000 shopping spree. We get them a new haircut. And so and a makeover. And the whole point is, one, we've built up their confidence and we've helped this person throughout the whole year, let alone then they feel completely different. And it's just the power of that is just completely amazing. And so that's where being a maven of money and independence and power and all of that, it's a part of me.
Yeah. So her talking about getting the card reminded me of what they did for you.
And what?
When
the therapist handed me that
the therapist, and then you were also put in touch with one of the victims advocates, weren't you?
Right away. Yeah, when I went to make the report and they actually ended up arresting her. And I don't know, I'm sure somebody is looking out after me because right away I had an advocate within minutes right there at the sheriff department. And of course, I don't know how all that works. And they gave me a little pager thing that you just press and it calls her or 911. That's what it was, 911. So it was just a little pager that called 911. I never used it because I didn't hang around with her after all that. But if she would have pursued me, then I could have pressed the button. But yeah, they had me an advocate right away. And but I never got a hold of my advocate. It's just like I can do this on my own.
It's your guy.
I got a friend.
And that is so typical of men. I know I've talked with my dad many times about the situation, and his story has literally changed in his mind. When I picked him up at the hospital, his story was then, and some of it is the same, but he says that he fell on his back. He fell on his back. Well, he couldn't have fallen on his back. The tire prints were on his back. So his mind has retold that story to himself. He and her gaslit himself to believe that he wasn't abused. And all these years later, he still loved her. And even though I got him out of that relationship and everything, and I myself, I was not just a black belt, but I worked for the sheriff's department. And I helped during that time, I helped women and children get out of abusive homes. I taught self-defense in the abuse shelter. And I didn't, unlike you guys, where you ended up in those situations that the card was handed to you and the pager was handed to you, and then you had a therapist that gave you a prescription for a new life. It took me until I started writing my first book, which I'm in the process of now. And I got to the part where I was telling my story, and I had to put the book on the back burner because there was so much that I didn't realize that I had hid from myself about that situation. I couldn't call him an abuser, which even to today, calling him an abuser doesn't fit right. He abused me. There was abuse. He was verbally abusive to me all the time. And the physical abuse was a situational thing. What I did created a situation, and the situation just, fast forward, really fast. And pretty soon there was hands on me. And then the last time he threw me across the yard and I dislocated my left leg. And that one I finally saw as physical abuse. And I was able to start the process to get out of the relationship. But here we sit in here, Nicole, all three of us were in this relationship wondering, how did we get here? And we didn't really even know, in some cases, like in mine for sure, that it was even physical abuse or even abuse at all. It's a crazy thing that puts us there.
Well, I always remember the book, Walking on Eggshells, and like the journey of it. Like, how did I get here? What am I in? And even now, like, I just feel just totally like enlightened is the word. Like now, I do somatic exercises now, and just like, I've just always been a huge reader, but it's all of a sudden I did ART, alternative resolution therapy, last year. And I then physically, my adrenals were failing and my cortisol levels were off the charts. And so it's just been this huge like physical health journey for me. I felt like in the beginning it was kind of a mental health journey, not that the mental component has gone away, but more of a physical health journey. And it's just been, fascinating to learn and research more about trauma and complex PTSD and all of these things, and how they dramatically affect you, and how like you would, you rationalize things so much in your brain. And I think that's probably why I'm still single, because so many times, I was told for every year you're in an abusive relationship, you should not date for 3 months. And so I figured it out. I'm like, okay, I cannot date till February of 2012. Well, then once in February of 2012 came, I started dating, but I'm like, and one of the first exercises that my therapist had me do, I saw her and she's like, I need you to read Walking on Eggshells. So I did, or The Verbally Abusive Relationship. So I did that. And then she's like, I want you to do a list. I want you to write down 12 things that you want in a partner. So I wrote down my 12 things. And then the next day, the homework was, I want you to highlight the ones that are non-negotiable. So like, I'm super allergic to smoke. And so like being a non-smoker is a non-negotiable. And then she's like, I want you to check off the ones that your husband, because I was married at the time, met. And he met 3 of the 12 things. But by that time, I had more than 12. I'd come up with 26. So he met 3 of the 26 things. And then afterwards, I was like, you know what? He really doesn't meet these 3 things. Because 1 was a non-smoker, but he started smoking again. 2, that he was very close with his family. And I learned that he really wasn't that close with his family. And then the 3rd one is a sense of humor. And he's really didn't have a sense of humor. I felt like it was more mean and more sarcasm. But I've kept that list. And that list now has 42 things on it. And so my mentor, it's so funny because my mentor's like, Nicole, you're not going to find perfection. I'm like, I'm not looking for perfection. I am just looking to keep myself safe and be in a healthy relationship. And I think that's also the beauty of being a wealth advisor. When people come and sit in my office and they're willing to fight in front of me, Like, there's so few people, in my opinion, that really have that great communication, that deep respect for each other, and that true healthy relationship. And I still have this, eye in the pie sky idea that, that still exists and it's available out there. But all of these things that happen to you along the way define who you are and set that tone. And, like my list of 42 things, like I will always have that. Am I going to find someone that meets all 42? Probably not. But if I can get close, I'll be happy.
Yeah, my list didn't have quite 42 on him, but he met every single one of them on my list. And I did. Tony Robbins talked about how he met his wife, Sage, and he had this list and it was in his pocket. And I never forgot that all these years later. So as I was dating, I would put things, I don't want that, do want this, can't. Now, when we went on our first date, he did do a lot of the things that I said couldn't be a part of the first date, but he did them, like as he said, as long as you smile, it's an okay thing. And he told me to jump in the truck.
I said, get in the truck.
Get in the truck.
But that's after we met for 3 hours.
Yeah.
So she already knew me. So I didn't just show up and say, get in the truck.
It was just a funny thing because I'm a martial arts and I taught self-defense. There was a lot of, things that I would tell women, don't do this on the first date, park here, don't meet there, and make sure that somebody knows where you're at. Well, a couple of those things that were on that part of the list, I kind of didn't do completely with him, like jump in the truck. I did get in his truck.
Then we went to a restaurant, but we already spent 2-ish hours somewhere else. And we just got along so well. So,
and there is somebody that can meet the majority of those 42. He's wonderful. We communicate, and our tough communications, yeah, they're tough and we want to leave the room, but we have figured out how to relax through them and breathe through them and get those tough communications. We've been together for 7 years and we've only had less than a handful of what we would call, well, there's been 3, what we would call not good conversations.
right. Yeah. Made it through it though. Made it through a couple storms.
And those 3 helped us for all of the conversations that could have gone bad, haven't, because of those 3. So one of the things that I want to we're going to have to start winding down, but one of the things that I've noticed with your conversation, we had another CDFA that was on here and she told of her abuse story and she told me later, actually she put it in one of her posts, her name is Victoria Kirilloff, and she put in one of her posts that she was on the show and that I asked really tough questions. Mm-hmm. Well, through the course of those apparent tough questions, she has now changed her course of working with women. And now she's heading in a very similar direction as you are. She's obviously got a ways to go to catch up to you, but she now is working with the domestic violence story. She's speaking out more and it's opened up a whole world of healing for her. So that's what the work that you're doing is doing for people out here. You get to see some of that, but here we are on the show and there's so many people that will get to listen to you, and those people that you never know listen to you are going to hear your story and you're going to get help from that.
Yeah,
they're going to get help.
Yeah, when I did my radio show, I saw that because I did a radio show for 5 years and like people would call and it was all about money. People would call in and ask financial questions. And so I would get that immediate gratification, you could say, of someone like, oh, wow, like I'm going to now do my Roth IRA, or like, thank you, you gave me the advice I needed for my kids, or I'm going to give my kids an allowance, or what, like whatever it is. And, but and it's, my team thinks it's so funny because there'll be someone that, I heard Nicole speak in 2020 or 2002. And like, the big joke is how old I am now in the office, but like, that's what I love. Like, I love the snowball effect. And that's why the whole concept of my foundation is, helping one woman, helping transform her to then help other people. Because if we change one person, we can then change the direction of so many different people's lives. And that's what's
Right.
so powerful. And that's where, for me, everything that I've been through and everything that my kids have been through, I don't want anyone to go through that. Like, oh my goodness, like awful, unbelievably awful. And so if I can help mitigate that, or help someone make change, or help inspire someone, or give someone insight, because when you're in a domestic situation, like every time I go to the doctor and they ask you, or do you feel safe in your home? Every time now I say, thank you for asking that. I said, your question, because the majority of the time he would, especially when I was pregnant, he would come with me to the doctor so that I never could give the truthful answer. But I'm so happy that they asked that question, because it's just one more time to stop and pause where you're like, I'm not crazy. Like, this isn't safe. And so if I can inspire someone to help, prevent something from happening, or help their friend or their sister or their brother or whomever, or their child, like that, that's what this is all about. It's all about helping people.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, so much so. And that's why that's why he's doing the show with us, is because he wants to help the men that don't know.
Right.
So we've got to hear an awesome part of your story and what the work that you've done, and part of your journey to get to this point. Very, very small part of your journey. But if people are wanting to work with you, how can they get a hold of you, Nicole?
So we're on, you name it, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, like we're everywhere. But otherwise you can go to NicoleMiddendorf.com. Or if that's too hard to type out, you can just Google me. I'm everywhere. But Prosperwell.com. So Prosperwell.com, or thelivitlist.com.
And give us just a little bit more on the Live It list and what you're doing with that.
Yeah, so it was a tool for me to really help boost my confidence, because I would, I drove a race car, I swam with sharks, I went dog sledding, I rappelled down the Ecolab building, I did a sailing lesson, I flew a plane. Like, when I would go do these things that would physically and emotionally scare me, when I then was in the courtroom or had to testify or had to meet with child protection or deal with a difficult situation with my children or exchange at the police station, I was less intimidated and I felt more confident. And so the Live It list for me helped me find myself again. It helped me boost my confidence. It helped me find happiness, and it helped me figure out like my story and my why. And so that's where now we have the liveitlist.com, and we have Live It list journals. We help people come up with what's their own Live It list. And the concept is just to do one thing a month, one fun, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to hop on a plane and go to Costa Rica or Dubai. It could be going to a movie by yourself. It could be going rock climbing. It could be, whatever, a pillow fight with your kids. It's all about living life with intention and being very thoughtful. And so the Live It list is just, we have a Facebook community, so you sure can join that. It's all about this movement of having happiness and finding fulfillment in life. But we are redoing our journals. We should have them done later this fall. And that's where it's a tool to help you come up with, what are your goals? Coming up with a vision board? What's your why? Journaling, asking you some of these questions so that you really figure out what's important to you about your life, let alone what's important to you about your happiness.
That just sounds like an amazing group. And again, just for the viewers, they have that on Facebook. So that's a great place for you to go and be involved with Nicole's work. So it's a great thing. So something that's super important for all of our viewers to know and to remember, that if you are in a violent situation right here and now, please call 911 here in the US. And Joe often says this: once you call them, make a report, press charges, and don't remove the charges. Follow suit. Those charges that you press can be your ticket out safely. So that is the very best direction to go. If you're in the UK, the number is 999. Get the police there and press those charges, keep those charges. If you are in a domestic violence situation, please call the domestic violence hotline at 800-799-7233. That number again is 800-799-7233. So if you would like to reach me or talk to Joe, I'm a certified divorce coach, meaning that I'm trained in divorce and its complexities. I specialize in high conflict divorce, especially that with a toxic, narcissistic partner. Joe has experienced this narcissistic abuse, and we are both here. You can reach us through my email at coachtinalyn@gmail.com. That's coach, COACHTINALYNN@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and I guess I'm on the other TikToks, and I'm on I can't even remember what the other one, Instagram, and you can find me there by going, you can look up Tina Lynn Huggins. Huggins is Huggins. And I would like for you, if this has been helpful at all, please like, comment, and share this so that it can help other people. Nicole, thank you so much for being here with us today. Do you have any final advice that you can give anybody?
I would say give yourself grace. Make sure to give yourself some grace throughout the whole process, or wherever you're at in any point in your life. Give yourself grace.
Amen. Do you have any final pointers?
Well, when you brought up the Walking on Eggshells book, that was the first book I read through my dilemma when we were separated. And I started highlighting the stuff in the book that was important to me. I almost highlighted the whole book. And no kidding, I had to put it down and go, if I highlight any more, it's just going to be the whole book. So that resonated with me big time. And my therapist told me to read it, and he was definitely right on cue on that one. So, and yeah, grace is wonderful. And I think that simple things kind of try to enjoy. I mention to people when they're having a hard time, look up. It'll change your attitude. Just look up, because it'll just lift the weight. So looking up helps me. It's just one of those physical, mental things that's connected. So looking up.
And smile.
Yeah, there you go.
Smile. Very important. Thank you again, Nicole, for being here with us.
Thank you.